Right.
Okay, call the meeting to order.
Moved by Councillor McGuire, second by Councillor Hooper. Be it resolved that the regular meeting of the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Assiginack be open for business at 7 p.m. with a quorum of members present, with Mayor Reid presiding in the chair.
All those in favor? We would like to begin by acknowledging that we are gathered on the traditional lands of the Three Fires Confederacy, the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi peoples of the Mindy-Mincing. We recognize and deeply appreciate the stewardship and historic connection to this place, and recognize that we must do more to learn about its rich history so that we will better understand our role as residents, neighbors, partners, and caretakers. Okay, adoption.
Moved by Councillor McGuire, second by Councillor Hooper. Be it resolved that we approve the agenda as presented.
Oh, all those in favor? I'll remind you, if you have a pecuniary interest, you may declare it now or at the time it arises and the general nature thereof. And announcements. Anybody? Jen?
I have one. The summer market at the museum will be starting. A lot of people have been asking, so it'll be running Fridays again from 10 a.m. until 2 p.m. starting July 4th. So we welcome vendors and shoppers, of course.
Of course. That's wonderful.
I don't necessarily have an announcement, but I have a suggestion from a ratepayer. Is it okay to mention that or?
Perhaps it might be better to put it in writing.
Okay,
Okay. Because we don't really discuss things in announcements.
okay.
I want to remind people that we have a July 1st celebration that's going to be going on. A lot of it will take place at the arena. Sounds like there's going to be a lot of new things for the kids. There's also a scavenger hunt put on by the museum. And I believe the library has got an O Canada contest. So we'll have to look into that. I don't think it's been published yet, but we'll have to keep an eye on that. But I'm encouraging everybody to take part in that. I think it'll be a really good day for everybody. Firefighters will be there, I believe. Yeah, it's good. Okay, public meeting.
Moved by Councillor Hooper, seconded by Councillor McGuire. Be it resolved that we adjourn from our regular meeting and open meeting held under the authority of Section 34 of the Planning Act in order to hear comments and propose zoning bylaw amendments with Mayor Reid presiding in the chair.
All those in favor? Okay, call the meeting to order. The items on council's agenda tonight is holding of a public meeting with respect to the introduction of a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 2024-10. What method was used to give notice of the public meeting?
And the circulation of notice was by first class mail as per Section 34 of the Planning Act and Ontario Regulation 54506. And the posting of notice clearly visible to the public.
On what date was the notice given?
It was published on May 27th, 2025.
So my calculations that the notice was given 20 days in advance of the meeting, and this satisfies the notice bylaw requirement of 14 days advance notice. What is the purpose and reason for this bylaw?
The zoning amendment application has been received from Aaron Ariganello on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Chapman to fulfill conditions of consent to sever file number B2724 as imposed by the Minnetonka Planning Board to permit special provision. Only one seasonal dwelling and accessory uses thereto within the proposed severed lot, which is to be identified as a part. Numbers on a new deposited plan of survey within lands described as being part of lot 21 concession 5 surveyed as on part 18 on plan 31 R 1247 Township of Shawinigan, Municipality of Assiginack, District of Manitoulin.
Are there any persons present who wish to make oral or written submissions on the proposed bylaws If so, would they please give their names, addresses, and postal codes to the clerk? Okay, seeing none. We will first hear from those in support of the bylaws, and then we will hear from those opposed to the bylaws. We ask that all persons wishing to address the bylaw, please direct their questions to the chair. Seeing none, the public meeting is now concluded. Thank you for attending.
Okay, moved by Councillor Hoover, seconded by Councillor McGuire, be resolved that we conclude our public meeting and resume our regular council meeting.
All those in favor? Okay, we're going to adoption of the minutes.
Moved by Councillor Hoover, seconded by Councillor McGuire, be resolved that we adopt the minutes of the meeting of regular council of May 20th, 2025, special council meeting of May 27th, and June 2nd, 2025, and the committee of the whole on June 3rd, 2025.
Is there any discussion on these questions? Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. We have a delegation tonight. I'd like to welcome Jeremy Cormier from MPAC. He's going to give us a brief overview on what MPAC does.
Great, thanks so much for having me here today. So my name is Jeremy Cormier. I'm the account manager for Sudbury Manitoulin districts. I liaise with councils and I attend conferences, which are where I met your mayor. So I'm happy to be here tonight to talk about who MPAC is, what we do, and then talk briefly about the relationship between assessment and taxation. So this is pretty short. If there are any questions, maybe we can just wait till the end. So who is MPAC? We are really Ontario's property experts. We assess and classify over 5.7 million properties in the province. And we generally update assessments every 4 years, but due to the pandemic, you may have heard that the scheduled reassessment was canceled. And we're still awaiting word from the province to know when the next reassessment will happen. But we've continued to work. So last year we added $42.7 billion in new assessment. And we added that as if it were built in 2016. So anything that's new, we kind of convert to 2016 dollars. So it's fair and equitable with the rest of the assessment base. The total value of properties in the province is about $3 trillion. There are 5 major factors that affect about 85% of a typical home's value. These aren't in any order. They're all the things intuitively that you would think about when you're purchasing real estate. So the first one is the age of the building, and this is adjusted for any improvements that have been made. 2 is the location of the property, the quality of construction, the square footage, and lot dimensions. So if any of these factors are incorrect, you should absolutely let us know because it's affecting your assessment likely. So what happens if you disagree with your assessment or if you have incorrect data? The first thing you're going to ask yourself is, could I have sold my home for the assessed value as of January 1st, 2016? That's what the value represents, and that's what it will be judged on if you submit a request for reconsideration to us. Excuse me. Next, you're going to go to aboutmyproperty.ca. That's a free website available to all owners in the province of Ontario. The way you access it is through a key on your assessment notice. If you misplaced your assessment notice, you can call our call center and they'll help you reset the password. This website allows you to look at all your property's details. It also allows you to look at similar homes in your community to see how you're assessed relative to those homes. And then a final step to submit a request for reconsideration to us. So an RFR is free. Every year by March 31st, you can file one with MPAC. And it's really an opportunity for MPAC to address errors. There are 3 outcomes. 1, we confirm the value is correct. 2, we will increase the value. We'll only do this if we find kind of substantial improvements that have been made without permits or that kind of thing. And lastly, we'll reduce your assessment. So any of those outcomes are appealable to the Assessment Review Board for a fee. I'm going to switch gears and just talk about the relationship between property value and taxes. So for an owner, it's relatively straightforward. Your assessed value times the tax rate equals the taxes that you pay. If you improve your property, you improve your assessment and your taxes increase. But what happens for a reassessment? So we're anticipating a pretty large increase in property values from 2016. Does that mean people's taxes will increase? The answer is, it depends. So it depends how much your property is increasing relative to the average increase. The reason for this is that municipalities are required to lower their rates to offset the average increase that's due to a reassessment. So if your property is increasing below the average, you'll pay less tax. If it's increasing at the average, you'll pay about the same. And if it's increasing higher than the average, then you'll pay more. That's assuming that the municipality spends the same amount of money, which we know is probably unlikely, but that's a requirement. Kind of you're required to lower your rates, and then if you increase spending, attribute increased taxes to that. So that's all I have today. I'm happy to come back and do a deeper dive on how we do specific assessments publicly. But if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take those.
Questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
I sell real estate.
Yeah.
Just in full disclosure. So, and generally speaking, for the past 11 years, the conversation has always been that your assessed value doesn't necessarily reflect market value.
That's right. It reflects 2016 market value.
But even back then, it did not reflect. In our area, and certainly our assessments are very different than what we're selling property for now. So when this reassessment happens, when the government comes out, will things take that jump that COVID brought us in real estate, as far as assessed value goes?
Yeah, I would push back and say that our assessments are extremely accurate for residential assessments.
Okay,
They're well within the international kind of thresholds and for standards. But in terms of the jump, there will be a jump. So what you're seeing in market activity will be reflected. The problem is we don't know what the valuation date is yet. So the province tells us when to look at property sales. We don't do any predicting. We analyze sales that have occurred in the past. And then we pin all of the values to that date. So yeah, they will definitely increase, and substantially too.
substantially for some.
So the slide that I put on the board here, this is gonna be really important that people understand, to not be upset or worry about that. It really depends on how much you increase relative to everyone else in your class. So certain segments of your class, like your residential class, have outpaced others. For instance, like, waterfront and non-waterfront. So there will be a shift, however that kind of bears out based on the valuation date that's selected. We don't have specifics about that right now because we don't have a valuation date, but yeah.
But further to Councilor's question, if they set a valuation date of January 1st, 2020,
Yeah,
which I think would be asinine, but it is the government. If they do that, we're not gonna reflect we're not gonna get close to actual market value. Whereas if they set it for January 1st, 2026, we gather all of that. I think that's.
it really depends. That's why I won't commit to like what
Yeah.
the shift will be, but there will be shifts. And so for the segments of your class, your res class, I'm talking about res class because that's most of your properties are residential. But for segments of your res class that are lower than they should be, for the time we haven't had a reassessment, they've been paying a disproportionately lower share than they might otherwise. So for those, since 2020, basically.
So just for layman's terms, so a house that's say assessed at 80,000. And that's what they're paying taxes on, but realistically, they could get 225 on the market.
Yeah,
Their taxes are going to
no,
go up.
no. It depends on what the other properties do. So everybody's properties are lower than they should be, according to the current market, like today. So if everyone's property values increase at the same rate, then no one's taxes will change because assessment's fundamentally a distribution mechanism. It's not a way to raise taxes. So the one exception to that is new assessment. When it's added in year, it can be extra revenue for you, but only if you don't budget for it. And only in the year you collect it. So in future years, it becomes part of a broader distribution of taxes. So a reassessment will not solve any revenue problems that you have. It will redistribute what you need to spend. So municipalities are required to set their spending requirements. and use assessments and tax rates to distribute spending.
Yeah, that wasn't what I was asking though. I actually had a ratepayer come up that is living in an older home in town and they're quite concerned about this.
Yeah,
Maybe because their home is valued at such an older rate.
but their home's valued as if it were valued in 2016, like as if it sold in 2016.
Mhm.
Just like everybody's is. Like it's not necessarily the case that they will increase faster or slower compared to,
But they could.
they could. But it's not yet cause for concern because we don't know the valuation date. As Alden mentioned, like, it really does matter. If it doesn't capture those changes, then the distribution will change. We just don't know how it will change.
So, but eventually it will catch up. Eventually we'll begin that cycle again of the, even if they do prior to COVID and bring the date to 2020. And then
But by the way, I don't quote 2020, like
No.
that's not something that's been floated.
it's not been floated, no, but I'm just giving an example. So, but eventually it will catch up in years to come, because the cycle of assessment will happen over and over again, where they reassessments are done per a certain time period. So eventually,
The province has to tell us,
yeah,
they tell us what the valuation date is. They also assign the length of the cycle.
yeah,
So in the past, like when it was originally announced, there were 2-year cycles and they modified that. So we really don't know what what the assessment system will look like. Currently, the province is undertaking a system review. And they've announced that they will not announce a reassessment date until the system review is over. So we're in the same boat as everyone else. Like we're a stakeholder in that review, just like you are. We are advocating for regular reassessments because the fair and equitable distribution of taxes is important. And right now that's not being captured. One of the things to think about, it's not a local example, but imagine how many Amazon packages did people get in 2016 compared to now? So you can imagine that the warehouses Amazon owns, are those equitably assessed right now? They're probably worth a lot more money than they were then.
yeah.
So that redistribution will happen. We just don't know how that's gonna shake down yet.
And just to remind you that we figure out what we need as a township, as a council, how much money we need, and that's how we set our tax rate. That just because somebody's assessment goes up doesn't necessarily mean their taxes will go up by the same amount. If we don't need that much money, then our tax rate comes down.
You're required to lower it to offset the average increase.
Right.
So like the last reassessment in Sudbury, my value went up. But on the interim tax bill, so before they increased spending, my taxes went down. My taxes went up on my final bill, but it's because they spent more money, not because of the reassessments. It's because my house, it increased, but not as much as everyone else's. So that's a real experience that I had with the reassessment last time.
That's a good example. That's something people can relate to.
Yeah, and
Not,
like the reassessment's
What
not
are you
something to
thinking
be
now?
overly worried about, but it will change how your taxes are distributed. It's not gonna just magically add extra revenue to your municipality. And I think some municipalities think that's the case. And part of why I'm here today is to explain that relationship in greater detail and answer questions. And once we do have a reassessment, I'll have them come back and do a much lengthier presentation. And also describe kind of what we're seeing once we know what the valuation date is. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment publicly about what that would look like, because we don't know, we haven't been told yet.
And that's fair enough. I think people just are worried and curious and not understanding why it's taking so long. And yes, I think in every area, so those of us who own old houses and people who own newer houses. So,
The one thing to put people's minds at ease, there's a misconception that newer homes are being added as if they're built now. We convert all of that back to as if they were built new in 2016. So they're equitable from that perspective. They reflect the 2016 value. All of our values reflect that.
Any more questions right now?
No,
Okay,
Thank you very much.
okay, thank
thank
you.
you very much.
Moved by Councilor Hoover, second by Councilor McGuire, be it resolved that we express our appreciation to Jeremy Cormier from MPAC for his time and effort in delivering an informative presentation.
All those in favor? Here. Oh. Report?
Moved by Councilor McGuire, second by Councilor Hoover, be it resolved that council accepts the consolidated financial statement as of December 31st, 2024, and audited by Freeland Caldwell Riley.
Is there any questions or discussion on that? All those in favor? The whole vote? The treasurer's report? Oh, okay. So, treasurer's report.
Moved by Councilor McGuire, second by Councilor Hoover, be it resolved that council accepts the treasurer's financial statement as of May 31st, 2025.
Okay, questions on that? Nothing?
No.
Okay, all those in favor? And action required. Anyone?
Moved by Councilor Hoover, second by Councilor McGuire, be resolved that council authorizes the following accounts for payment. Payroll, $120,441.38 pursuant to the attached treasurer's statement of accounts.
Any questions on that? All those in favor? General?
Moved by Councilor Hoover, second by Councilor McGuire, be resolved that council authorizes the following accounts for payment. General, $113,413.60 pursuant to the attached treasurer's statement of accounts.
Questions?
No.
Nothing? All those in favor? Okay. Our insurance renewal,
Moved by Councilor Hoover, seconded by Councilor McGuire, be it resolved that council approves the municipal insurance program proposal in the amount of $82,751.
any discussion on that? All those in favor? Yeah. We have some requests for support. You have some individual, okay. So Peterborough,
Moved by Councilor Hoover, seconded by Councilor McGuire, be it resolved that we support the city of Peterborough regarding Bill 6 Safer Municipalities Act to have provincial legislation that defines workable standards for shelter space and or prohibiting encampments in the parks and open spaces.
is there discussion on that? That's something you want to support?
I'm fine with supporting it, sure.
Okay, all those in favor then? Yeah,
Moved by Councilor McGuire, seconded by Councilor Hoover, be it resolved that council supports the city of Woodstock regarding opposing Bill 5 Protecting Ontario by unleashing our economy act.
that's what I think is important.
Yeah.
I support it.
All those in favor?
Should we maybe just quickly say exactly what that means in a quick round
Do you want to explain that one?
for the repairs?
So in essence, the province is trying to fast track a piece of legislation to do with the ring of fire, and they've exempted themselves from pretty much all of the notice requirements in that affect any other piece of provincial legislation. Our First Nation communities have strenuously objected to it. There's a lot of environmental groups that are also objecting to it. And the request is basically for the province to follow its own rules that we would be subjected to make sure it's a fair and well thought of provincial policy.
Attacking everyone's land.
Everything.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, they're bulldozing their way through, they're just throwing all those regulations out the door. Township of Assiginack.
Moved by Councillor Hooper, seconded by Councillor McGuire, be it resolved that council supports the Township of Georgian Bay regarding advocating the province to address floating accommodations in Ontario.
I'm not sure I understood that one for MAGA.
So, let me paint a picture for you. We have, we have shoreline road allowance along all of Manitowoc Bay, right? You can have your dock into Manitowoc Bay. So if someone comes in, and they ask for permission to build a dock, which they're granted, M&R. And then they put this huge dock structure out there, and they put 100 houseboats in. Those people are, in essence, living on the water. But they're still traveling your roads, they're still using your garbage. They're still drawing on municipal services. And under the current legislation and regulations, they're not taxable. They fall through a crack between whether it's a vessel or whether it's a building. And these Muskoka municipalities have really been hit hard with it. They've had fire calls that have been extremely difficult to deal with. They've had EMS requests that there's no such thing as a civic address. Some of these are permanently moored, some of them can move around on, picture that situation on Lake Manitou where it could affect 3 or 4 different municipalities. And you just spend your day jaunting in your boat from one municipality to the next. You're drawing on services, but you're not contributing to the tax base. And so the request here is to call a spade and say, they're not vessels, they're accommodations. If they're accommodations, they should be assessed, they should be taxed, they should be regulated. We're not allowed to, they're not subject to a zoning bylaw, you're not subject to the Ontario Building Code. And in these particular municipalities, you're talking about hundreds of residences. And I would strongly suggest we support it because it doesn't stop at the Muskoka Perry Sound line. It's coming here.
Absolutely.
That's what I was going to say, is
Yes.
I would support it, but I would also like to perhaps put it on an agenda for us to discuss and be proactive about it rather than reactive when the time comes that we have
Yes.
this situation taking place in our area.
Didn't we have a piece of a document that went through here in our first term regarding houseboats that we had supported?
Yes,
The word.
yes, but it didn't, it died in the transition between the provincial governments.
Okay.
And, Georgian Bay, Muskoka Lakes, they're just not letting this go because it's quite a cost to them.
That's too important. All those in favor then? So we have an invitation to the Horticulture Society.
Moved by Councillor Hooper, seconded by Councillor McGuire, be it resolved that council acknowledges an invitation to the Horticultural Society's 70th anniversary events. Further, the councillor will attend on behalf of the township.
Okay, I'll be attending both of them, so,
That's August 8th, right?
it's August 8th at the museum.
Yeah.
There's two.
There's two.
events.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a flower show on July 30th. So we're all invited to both of them. Okay. And we'll make sure, and like I said, I'll
The July 30th is where?
at the,
Thanks.
it's a flower show. And it is their 70th anniversary for both the museum and the horticulture, which is kind of an exciting and proud thing to have in town.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Did we contribute to that?
If you want.
Movement?
Yeah.
However, we
We haven't asked us.
we did give them the atrium with no charge. So. All those in favor? They would ask, but they asked us to lower the lease and we can. Bumblebee to the airport. Want to speak on
Our superintendent of public works and infrastructure believes that the Bumblebee single axle won't be required this winter. The airport commission has had a standing request for the last year or so that if it does become surplus, would the municipality consider taking it up there? It wouldn't have to be licensed, it would be operating only on the airport property. They have a similar vehicle, they have a vehicle from Navy, but it's a larger plow truck. And they need something a little smaller as well, for winter operations, and we have no objection to it. On an as is where is basis, like, Public Works isn't expecting we need it this winter. We could scrap it, we could put it out for lease or tender rather, or we could send it to a department that we contribute to and let them run it into the ground.
I think, knowing a little bit more about the airport than I ever knew before, I think the amount of emergency calls and stuff that most ratepayers are probably not aware of, I think we should do everything we can to support them in any way, and if that means a surplus Bumblebee ends up there, I support that.
Well, the airport is 1/3 ours too, so.
Mhm.
It would be our contribution, supporting similar to what Mimi did as well.
Absolutely.
So it's not really certifiable, it would be total cost prohibitive to put it back on the road.
Yeah.
As far as things are concerned, so it's a nice fit for the airport.
I agree. All those in favor of that? Did I sign? Okay. So seconder, yeah, we need a mover and a seconder for that then, okay. Jen and Bob. Okay. Consent December.
Moved by Councilor McGuire, seconded by Councilor Hoover, be it resolved that council has no objections to the consent to December file number B0925, owned by the Trimmers and the planning board to be so told, so.
Okay, discussion on that?
I solely supported in the fact that, you know what, this is moving forward, it's getting more people and more homes, and I support.
Would this be the third severance off that piece of property?
I think it's only the second.
In the just bottom corner, that's
Yeah.
not the first section? It's
Yeah, I
the
think-
second, that would be the first one, would it?
Yeah, this bottom,
Yeah.
I think we did the first, this would be the second,
Second, okay.
yes.
I had certainly supported it. My only one question is where the driveway will be located. Would that cause any issues? Because it's kind of on the bottom of that hill.
No, Public Works has looked at it, they're fairly comfortable that there's enough room with the, you know, with the 100 feet, but then be able to find a safe enough place,
Okay,
yeah.
just because it's kind of gonna be a dangerous corner, so we'll have to have signs.
It's not in time, yes.
And then put a sign up at the top of the hill, hidden driveway.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. We'll get the sign put on that. Anything else?
Position.
Okay, all those in favor? Information items,
Separate.
are they even separate? Okay.
By Councillor Bowerman, seconded by Councillor Elliott, be resolved that the request for support for Manitoulin Navy League is accepted as information.
Any discussion on that?
Were they not asking for a donation?
They are,
Okay. So we're just taking this as information.
as
right now?
information, okay, yeah. Okay, all those in favor? General fund,
Moved by Councillor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Bowerman, be it resolved that the request for support from Turtle Pond Wildlife Center is accepted as information.
and okay, this is one.
I would like to say that quite often we'll see on Facebook, people giving rescue rides to this organization, animals that have been hit, hurt, whatever, anywhere in Manitoulin, and I think it's a wonderful, wonderful operation they have going. Again, we are just looking at it as information at this time, but I just wanted to point it out and say thank you to all those volunteers while we have that opportunity.
All those in favor? Zoning amendment? Oh, that shouldn't be up there, I don't believe. Okay,
And then it's done for the actual bylaw. Yeah.
okay, okay, that's the bylaw, right?
Yeah, to look for that, actually.
Okay. So the Manitoulin needs to follow airport commission.
Be resolved that council accept the minutes of the airport commission as information.
Any-
Have a good second for that.
Oh, okay, move in second, please. Okay, so Janice. Do you guys have anything you want to add to that? Everything's going well with the airport?
So if we
Good.
get to hear about Bumblebee,
Yes, I'll be happy about that. Keep it clean, okay? All those in favor? We have some bylaws.
Moved by Councillor Bowerman, seconded by Councillor Elliott, be resolved that bylaw number 2025-12, being the bylaw to amend number 2024. 100 PA 25001, Schedule B and B8 of the Manitoulin official plan be given a first, second, and third final reading and an open council.
Questions, discussion?
So in March, we had a public meeting under the Planning Act. We considered the property that had been designated aggregate resources. And the license had been surrendered and the property had been rehabilitated. We considered both an official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment. The zoning bylaw amendment was adopted. There was a change in provincial regulation in January that didn't catch up with us until after the March meeting, that traditionally official plan amendments have been enacted by the Manitoulin Planning Board. Now they're being enacted by the municipality. So basically, all we're doing is something we could have done at the end of March had we known the regulation was in place. And as I said, we had the public meeting, there were no objections.
So all those in favor then? Okay, and a bylaw to enter into an agreement with Twisted Sister.
Moved by Councillor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Bowerman, be resolved that bylaw number 2025-13 enter into an agreement with Twisted Sister, being a bylaw to policy, being a bylaw, be given first, second, and third final reading and enacted by the council.
Okay, it's a one-year agreement again. Any other discussion?
I just want to point out, we do have other food truck spots available still in town if people who have a food truck would like to come into the township and talk about it.
Yes,
Yeah.
Right, just because we haven't said it a lot publicly,
yes.
so I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
So,
All those in favor then? And zoning.
Moved by Councillor Bowerman, seconded by Councillor Elliott. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2025-14, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 2024-10, be given a first and second reading. And enacted in open council.
Any discussion on that one? Nothing? All those in favor? It's carried.
That was up in 8, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, now we have a bylaw to set our tax ratios.
Moved by Councillor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Bowerman, be it resolved that bylaw number 2025-15, being a bylaw to set tax ratios for the Township of Assiginack, be given a first, second, and third final reading and enacted in open council.
Questions? Discussion? All those in favor? And adoption of tax rates.
Moved by Councillor Bowerman, seconded by Councillor Elliott, be it resolved that bylaw number 2025-16, being a bylaw to adopt tax rates, be given a first, second, and third final reading and enacted in open council.
Questions?
I just have one question. Were the changes that we had talked about, taken into account, the taking out of the cell phones, the changes in the donation, just because we didn't get that page, so I just wanted to make.
Yeah.
You would have, in that last package I gave you, it was all recorded.
Okay, thank you. Just making sure.
All those in favor? And the water rates.
Moved by Councillor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Bowerman, be resolved that bylaw number 2025-17, being a bylaw to establish water rates, be given a first, second, and third final reading and enacted in open council.
Discussion?
When's
Questions?
the water levy done?
Made a capital levy
Yeah.
this year.
December 31st?
Yes.
Anything else? Yeah.
Is this equal to the 10% that we discussed or not? Not related to that?
No.
Okay. Okay.
All those in favor then? That's carried. Okay. That concludes our regular meeting. We do have a closed session today.
Moved by Councillor